Morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest TMA virtual briefing discussing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that President Trump signed into law earlier this summer. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant. I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA lobbyist David Curtin, as well as a very special guest, U.S. Representative Mike Bost, who represents the 12th Congressional District of Illinois. Good morning, David and Congressman Bost.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Well, we're going to spend the next half hour discussing what's included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and how it will impact U.S. manufacturing and all Americans. Now I'll turn it over to TMA lobbyist David Curtin, who will introduce our special guest and get the discussion started. And at the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of Congressman Bost by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rich. Congressman Bost, welcome. You're a former Marine. You served 10 terms in the Illinois House of Representatives in Springfield, and you've been serving in Congress since 2015. Can you share a little bit more about yourself for our small and mid-sized manufacturers?
Yeah, so everyone that's on the call knows, you already know this, but I was born and raised in a trucking business, small family business that grew during my grandfather started in 1933. I came home from the Marine Corps. I was an electronics specialist in the Marine Corps. Came home from the Marine Corps, married young, but came home and started running that business at about 23 years old. I automatically thought I would be in that industry all my life, and surprised that I wasn't. But I ended up getting involved in local politics at that age. And some never thought that I would do this by any means. I thought I'd be in that trucking business. As it was, I ran the trucking business for 10 years. I loved it for 8. And my brother has it now, and my cousin. So it's though it's not a manufacturing business, it actually is a small business, as you understand, because it is a trucking industry business, as well as we have a parts supply there and a full maintenance shop. So grew up in small business. And not only that, then my wife Tracy and I also have now, for more time than we want to admit, she was a cosmetologist. We owned our own beauty salon. Our daughter now has that. So touching on those small family businesses, I'm very aware of the issues that people that are in business face, especially from the small and medium size.
Well, very good. Yeah, that's important. And right now, you're in the middle of a tour on the Big Beautiful Bill. You're
on the Big Beautiful Bill
constituents in your district, and you're talking about the specific benefits. And can you talk about these in relationship maybe to the small and mid-sized manufacturers, the permanent?
I can. Let me first, if I can, and then let me go through some things that were actually in the bill that I see that not only help mid-sized manufacturers, but help everyone. Okay. Had we not passed this bill, the 2017 tax cuts would have went away. That would have been an average of about a 24% tax increase on everyone. With this, we did get the elimination of tips on overtime, on tips, and on new car loans, and a reduction on Social Security, the taxes you pay on Social Security. We added the amount of money we needed to secure our border and actually get invested into the fact of removing those who have spent 4 years coming across the border illegally. We also did some very strong things as far as having SNAP work requirements and Medicaid work requirements. And we got rid of a lot of the Green New Deal, where we could actually focus on true transfer issues that are out there. So it actually affects about 68,000 families in my area alone with the child tax credit. And it's led to 94% of the taxpayers keep their standard education deduction. So there's a lot of other things out there, but it does protect, and this is vitally important for what we're talking about. It protects, we run the numbers, 9,000 manufacturing jobs and over 800 million manufacturing wages in my district, the Illinois 12th alone. So it's really a good bill, regardless of those that are trying to argue against it. And we may touch on what their arguments are later on. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and multiply that by the whole state. That's pretty awesome.
It is the biggest bill I've ever worked on.
Is that right? Um, well, recently TMA did a survey of our members on the topic of energy, which is on the minds of a lot of people these days because our energy prices are going up,
Yep.
especially in the summer months. But for 55% of TMA members said they were concerned about the increased energy prices. 22% said they were very concerned because they've had to cut costs. The bill you're discussing today repeals the Biden administration's Green New Deal programs,
Right.
which you mentioned. And Illinois is our goal, or at least Illinois' elected officials' goals, is to be dependent on 100% renewables. And so we've got a little collision course going there. So what do you think is going to happen, and how can you explain how the Trump administration's plans will avoid this?
Sure. So there's several factors here, and I think it's vitally important to know the history of Illinois on what we've done with our energy grid and everything like that.
Okay.
Understand, I spent 20 years on the committee, which is the Public Utilities Committee. And we were working at that time, and though we thought it was a good idea, I don't know, looking back now, whether it was when we moved into deregulation, where you could wheel and purchase your electricity offline. Now, let me tell you the policies of this state, besides that bill, and I'll touch with that in a second, to move forward to try to shut down coal, try to shut down natural gas, let our nukes run out. You know, I tell you what, I'm an all-in guy. I've got solar panels on the roof of my house, okay? But no matter what you do, and many solar panels you want to put out there or windmills you want to put out there, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, and you need a base load. And that base load is either got to be coal, natural gas, nuke, or what we don't have a lot of is water powered. And so, but the state of Illinois did two things. The most recent thing was the law that they put in place about 4 years ago. Now, remember, we have, in my district, we have Prairie State Energy. Now, let me tell you how new that is. Rod Blagojevich came to break ground for that plant at the last of his second term, or last of his term before he got in trouble. Okay? So it was only built a short time ago. It is the most efficient coal burning plant in the world. Its waste product is steam. Steam. It is on what's known as a mouth mine generation system, which means they put it over the top of a coal vein, and that coal vein can last for 500 years. But if the rules stay in place that were placed in the state of Illinois 3 years ago, they will have to close that plant down in 2035. And we are already losing other plants. I have Joppa that's been closing. I've had Newton that's been closing. I have Baldwin that is down to one generation plant. And many of these were natural gas converted or were still burning coal. But what happened is, we actually thought it was a great idea for deregulation. And deregulation, the idea was that the Amrins, the CIPS, or the Amrins and the Commonwealth Edisons could then wheel and not own the power. So they only control the grid. Well, that's a great idea, except for the fact what we didn't realize is we thought all other states were going to do it. All other states did not do it. And what you have is you have the owners of these plants because they couldn't have no connection with the generation system. The generation systems themselves, unfortunately, the company made the investment as the original generation, knowing what the length of the time that plant would run, and calculated their profits based on that, not on reinvesting. But if you own the power grid, you would reinvest. And unfortunately, we have these tremendous amount of power stations out here now that aren't reinvesting, and you can't do it overnight. And it's a big fear coming up in the future, especially whenever we're looking at the fact of, you know, the things that are going to be going with AI and the amount of power that it's going to need if we're going to remain competitive among the other 50 states. So that's kind of where we're at. And the state legislators need to wake up. Now, your other question was what we were doing from the Trump administration. The Trump administration has basically did every administrative order that they can. Even some I question if they can, but they've been signed in. Okay, and let me give an example of that. I was present when he signed the one. There were about four. One was that bringing the regulations off of coal burning power plants to bring coal back. A lot of the regulations were removed off the mining of coal, that it's still safe, but it allows for quicker access to that coal. And both of these things, they also did the same thing with natural gas. But then they did something that I don't know how they're going to implement, because it sounded wonderful, that they were going to fight against states that did not allow this to come to fruition. And I'm not sure with the 10th Amendment how that happens. Okay, but it is an executive order. So we'll see how the courts handle that and everything like that. But that is what they're trying to do, because what we saw with Texas and what we're going to see with Illinois and other places around on the grid. And remember, if everybody doesn't understand this, there's three grids in the United States. There's everything east of the Great Divide, everything west of the Great Divide. Those are two main power grids. And then, honest to goodness, if you have your Texas members on here, then there's Texas. And Texas is actually 180 degrees out of phase with the other two, so the two cannot feed together. So.
Well, so speaking, another survey, 43% of our TMA members responded to a survey said they were in favor of Illinois taking advantage of our state's nuclear and coal energy sources, and 39% were in favor of a combination of everything,
Right.
but only 18% support the small and mid-size, or support the staying the course to full dependence on wind and solar. But are there any other plans at the federal level to promote nuclear and clean coal sources? And if so, how long would it be before we see an increase in production in Illinois? You mentioned the 10th Amendment there a little bit, but do you think we can get any of that increased production and lower energy costs in Illinois by some of the things that Trump is doing?
We can, if we will not go into the arguments of trying to sue over the fact of freeing the coal and the natural gas. Now, as far as the nukes are concerned, there's some technology out there right now that is being really pushed hard by by those states that the power grid is tied with their own production. So where we know of peaker plants, and a lot of people understand the peaker plants are where, when we're in the summertime and the air conditioners going and there's a high draw for electricity, they go and they either have diesel and or natural gas, or some kind of smaller plant that generates a stronger amount of electricity to be pushed into the grid during the peak times. A lot of the electric companies have come to the realization that there is a great and easier way and cost-efficient way to use a small nuke, which is similar to what we use for our nuclear submarines, and use those as peaker plants, rather than having our great big, that we know as the nuclear power plants. Yes, should we invest in those? We should. We've got to still deal with the fact that we passed a law 25 years ago in Congress to take the waste and take it to Yucca Mountain, and that lawsuit's been going on forever. But as far as the smaller generations, I think you'll see a lot of those going into place for those peaks. But they got to roll them out fast, because I know each one of you, whether it's in your manufacturing business or whether it is in your home, July was terrible. With most bills around this nation. Like I said, I've got solar on my roof, and what normally is a $300 bill was a $700 bill.
Yeah.
And that's just my own home. And if you're on a set income, a senior on a set income, or a person who's disabled I don't know how you do this. And I'm going to tell you what I've heard out on this big, beautiful book tour is from small businesses that say, if this comes up, I work on a shoestring budget, and I can't afford to pay the electricity bill, and I'm going to have to lay people off to make that adjustment.
Yeah, yeah, we've had a lot of feedback on that too. How soon could the small modular nuclear reactors, which I think is what you're talking about, these smaller nukes, how soon could they come online? In other words, we've got this problem now
Now,
with high costs. So,
well, the problem is, I think they could come online very quickly if the federal and state permitting does not slow them down, because I'm not sure that our states have written their permitting laws to do anything but the major nukes. So it's still a nuclear power, so it still may fall under some of those regulations, and our state legislature is going to have to look at that. I mean, we could free up our side with administrative rule and then come back later and argue over the legislation. But our states, depending on what they already have in place, the big concern I would have is all they have done is written for the full-blown, full-size nuclear power plants, which ours are aging out very quickly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, we'll turn it back over to Rich here and see if there are any questions from the members who have been jotting them down while we've been talking. And I really appreciate the discussion about the nuclear, because it's all electricity. It depends on where it comes from, nuclear or coal or whatever. And we've got great nuclear in this state already. So
and nuclear is our cheapest.
It is cheapest. Okay. Rich?
Well, thanks, David. All right, it's time for questions and answers with TMA members. For those of you who are on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your question and submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. In the meantime, I will ask Congressman Bost the first question. It was pre-submitted by a TMA member. And this is, Congressman, I think they wanted to know a little bit more specifically about the Big Beautiful Bill Act and some of the tax relief for manufacturers, specifically that would affect manufacturers, and maybe kind of how it's even different from the original Trump tax cuts.
The tax relief, yeah. First off, I think that the biggest thing that we had, and I talked about that earlier, is the fact that the tax of benefits that do not come back on, and so that is for manufacturing, but as well as individuals. The tax incentives that are there for your employees are just tremendous if they will take advantage of those and make sure that they do. The other things that are in there as far as manufacturing is concerned is the amount of incentives to have manufacturing in the United States. So these are the type of things that encourage our GDP to grow. And I think that another thing that's going to come up besides the big, beautiful bill, at least I pray that it does, is the Fed is meeting next month. And if they don't bring their interest rates down, we got to quit having a political argument over this and actually allow the market to do what the market does, and the Fed to make a ruling that they should be making, which is bring our interest rates down, that allows retooling for our manufacturers at a sensible price. Let me tell you that in my time this last month traveling around, remember, my largest employer is Scott Air Force Base, and my second is Ag. I just came back from the Farm Progress Show yesterday in Decatur. And the biggest concern that our farmers have, and they are small businesses, that they see the price of these big equipment and they can sit and dream, but if you can't afford it and you can't afford to pay the interest on it, that's just equipment sitting out there. Now that equipment sitting out there affects our manufacturers, because each one of those products is your people working to, and it's great to have a product to sell if you got a buyer. And walking around there yesterday, it was wonderful. I'm going to tell you, I don't know, I've been to so many Farm Progress shows over the years and fairs, but that's the first time I've ever been with 70-degree weather, and I'm telling you, that's the best way to do it, because 105 is a whole lot worse. But watching our manufacturers of that farm equipment, and remember, we always say Caterpillar and John Deere, but you just don't understand how many of those smaller companies that have grain wagons, or they have disc systems, or they have all of these things that farmers use, that they come with a price, and you've got to, as a manufacturer, you've got to have that price, but we've got to make sure that something happens that I think when we grow our GDP, the economy gets to booming, and then we drop interest rates, we'll see that all come back. And I think that's some of the biggest stuff that's going to happen here out. Just the springboard that is affecting.
Thanks, Congressman. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, we're starting to get some questions from members. First question is about tariffs. They want to know, Congressman, they want to know what the current situation is and what can we expect next.
Okay, so let me tell you, first off, we've never had a president that understands deals better than this one, or that puts his own hand in on the deal. Most times they have negotiation teams. They have, and let me tell you that we are generating a lot of revenue from the tariffs, but it is taking even our best trade allies and bringing them back to the table, which is rightfully so. I mean, I watch, and I think it was wild. One of the things that some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, well, he just made in his last term the USMCA deal, and now he's come back and wants to change it. Well, yeah, that was 6 years ago. And, you know, every time you turn around, you're going to negotiate a new trade deal. And when we're dealing with Canada, one of our great trade partners, it's kind of been stacked against us, especially if you're in the dairy industry. And a lot of people don't realize this. Dairy products going into Canada have a 400% tariff. 400%. And they would not come back to the table and talk. They're now coming back to the table and talk. Our deal with Mexico is just about done, I think. All of these deals, and remember, we are dealing with so many countries every day, negotiating these deals through. Now, our biggest concern would be China. China is, I think that, and let me, I don't know, if you've watched this president, you know this. He's going to come to the table. He's expecting a deal to come here. He's going to make an offer here. And somehow he ends up getting here. And he does it over and over and over again. The question is the uncertainty that we feel right now, whether it's the ag people I'm talking to or whether it's you that I'm talking to, and the concerns that you might have with a supply chain that is interrupted. Right now, we have a real issue, and rightfully so. During Trump's last administration, when we saw certain things that started to happen, especially like the steel industry, where he had to come in, and Ross, who was the head of the chamber, with the head of the Commerce Commission, came up with and started using 232 for national security. That was a very wise thing to do, and it actually turned our steel market around. We have to make sure that these things come home to us. I wish that I could always say that, hey, I feel comfortable as all get out that this is going to happen and it's going to be fine. I believe we've got the best negotiator at the table. But let me put in perspective what we're dealing with today in comparison to what we were dealing with for the last 4 years. Ever since Dick Nixon, the administration of every presidency came to the Congress and asked for trade promotion authority. Everyone. Why? Because the president or their trustees go into a negotiation and they need to be able to negotiate with another country or a group of countries. He doesn't like it doing groups. He goes one-on-one to get a deal that he or she then can take back and not have to go back and say, oh, wait, I got to go to the 435 member board and get a vote to see if it's okay to pass it. That's not, you can't negotiate that way. So that's why trade promotion authority is important. Biden never asked for trade promotion authority. The first president since Dick Nixon. And whenever asked about it, they said, we're not going to make any deals. Well, now there's a lot of stuff to clean up afterwards. And so we're moving quickly, but it's sure not quick enough because of the people that are on this call. And I know and I understand this, and we're voicing your concerns because uncertainty is the worst thing you can have in manufacturing or farming. So,
thanks, Congressman. Quick follow-up on tariffs. We have a member who says, why doesn't the U.S. government exempt U.S.-based manufacturers from paying tariffs on machine tools they need to purchase in order to produce parts in the U.S.?
Yeah, I actually have asked the president's people on this because they did it last time. And I'll give you the answer I was given because there were certain ones that there were certain key things. And I'll give you an example. PepsiCo moved their all of the production of their concentrate to Ireland. Made a decision, a business decision to do that. Pepsi is going to be pushed into a situation because of the tariffs on Ireland to raise their rates higher than Coke and Dr. Pepper. Therefore, their market share will fall. So I went to the administration to talk to them about this. And they said, we did this. The president did this the last time. And when they did, it weakened their negotiation position. And therefore, they are not doing waivers at this time. I will continue to beg for certain ones. I know you're all around the nation. I would talk to your member of Congress, and you have an issue, have them go and beg to the administration that possibly. But as of right now, their position is to not allow any waivers because it will change their position as part of negotiation.
Great. Thanks, Congressman. We still have a few questions left. We're getting near the end, so I'm going to go quickly here. Another question, will we have enough workers in the future? Some data says no. Should we improve worker visa programs to help with this? Yeah. Congressman.
So let me go two different ways, not just visa, but also the big, beautiful bill when we put work requirements on those that are Medicaid. I said I'll get back to this, so let me get back to this. Medicaid, there's people out there that say we cut Medicaid. No, we did not. First off, we did not cut Medicare, and we did not cut Social Security, except for giving the tax break to the Social Security. Medicaid, on the other hand, we required that if you're drawing Medicaid or if you are on the SNAP programs, that if you're between the ages of 18 or 65 years of age, you are not mentally or physically disabled, you are not pregnant, and you do not have a child under 12, you are then required to work 20 hours a week, show you're working 20 hours a week, show you're pursuing work 20 hours a week, or that you're in an education program that takes up 20 hours a week, working towards an opportunity to be employed. That is trying to push people into our workforce. Now, on the visa side, let me tell you that we have to try to figure out, this is where we do need true immigration reform. Trust me, when those people come here on work visas, most of them are not wanting to come for citizenship. They're coming here to work, and they and their families have been doing it for years. We need to make sure that that system works well for those people who use migrant workers, whether it's on the manufacturing side of higher technical workers, or it's the labor side, what we have with all of our specialty crops, our dairies, those type of things. We tried to do that back in 2016 with the Good Latch bills, both Good Latch 1 and Good Latch 2. The reason we made an error is we had Good Latch 1 and Good Latch 2, which allowed an out for certain members. I voted for Good Latch 1. Well, I voted for Good Latch 2. We should combine them, and everybody should have had to vote to make that clear definition. Understand that having migrant workers is not wrong. It's essential for many of our industries, but it has to be done wisely. And unfortunately, what's happened over the last 4 years has fogged that line with the voting public because they automatically put a migrant worker in with illegals, which is not the case. And one of the guys that I know well is Dan Newhouse, who has his family is the largest hop growers in Washington State, and they've used migrant workers, same families, for 3 generations. and they have no intention. They come here and work, and then they go back and do their touchback, and they'd prefer to be home, but this is where they can make money.
Great. Thanks so much, Congressman. Well, unfortunately, I know you have another commitment coming up soon, so I think we have a few more questions, but I think we'll handle that. We'll see if we can get that to your staff and respond that way.
Well, enjoyed answering the questions and enjoyed talking about, the thing is, I can talk to you like this and no, there's no protesters outside. It's really amazing.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on and talking to us a little bit. But before we leave, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members, Congressman?
No, I just hope that this was helpful to inform you about, we're trying to do what's right. Look, we've still got the greatest nation in the world. I think we've got a president that's pushing us in the right direction, as long as you don't have look, you can hate his personality, but when I see the GDP growing, and when I see jobs coming back, and the energy, gas prices falling, we're headed in the right direction. It's just a big mess that has to be cleaned up, and we're going to be doing our job.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Again, I want to thank Congressman Mike Bost for joining us today, along with TMA lobbyist David Curtin for leading a wonderful discussion. Of course, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took time out of their day to join us today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.